Chapter 1. The real reason you overthink and why willpower alone does not fix it. You are not struggling because you are lazy. You are not stuck because you lack discipline. You are not failing to act because you do not want it badly enough. The truth is simpler, quieter, and far more uncomfortable. You're overthinking because your brain is trying to keep you safe. Overthinking is not a defect. It is a protection mechanism that was designed for survival, but misapplied to modern life. Your mind evolved to predict threats before they happen. In the wild, guessing wrong could get you killed. So your brain learned to skim possibilities, replay events, simulate outcomes, and run mental rehearsals. Today, the threats look different. They are not predators. They are embarrassment, failure, rejection, loss of control, uncertainty, or disappointing others. Your brain treats each of those as danger signals. So it does what it was built to do. It thinks more. That is the key truth. Overthinking is not about thinking too much. It is about feeling unsafe. When something matters to you, your brain says, "Let me make sure nothing goes wrong." It plays every scenario. It magnifies unlikely risks. It delays action because action creates the possibility of consequences. So it stalls. And the more you care, the more it stalls. Not because you are weak, but because your nervous system is trying to protect you from discomfort. This is why willpower does not cure overthinking. You cannot outmuscle your own safety system. If your brain believes action is dangerous, motivation speeches, and just do it, mantras will collapse the moment stress appears. Your mind will always revert to its primary directive, protect. So the question is no longer, how do I stop thinking so much? The real question is, how do I teach my brain that action is safe? Let us look at the cycle. You face a task. It could be sending an email, starting a business, going to the gym, recording a video, or having a difficult conversation. A small tension arises in your body. Micro fear. Your mind detects it and concludes, something is at stake here. It begins to predict. What if I fail? What if they judge me? What if this is the wrong decision? What if I waste my time? What if I regret it later? The nervous system tightens. Shoulders tense. Breath shortens. Heartbeat changes. Now the body confirms the brain's suspicion. We are not safe. So the brain does what it knows best. It delays. Let's think a bit more. Let's wait until we are ready. Let's gather more information. Relief follows. Delay removes pressure temporarily. Your system learns a powerful lesson. Avoidance reduces discomfort. The next time, the loop is faster. Soon, hesitation becomes habit, and the habit becomes identity. You stop saying, "I'm avoiding this task." You start saying, "I am an overthinker." But identities are learned, not discovered. And anything learned can be unlearned. To finally get things done, you do not need to silence your mind. You need to change the association between action and danger. You need to train your nervous system to experience movement, not as threat, but as tolerable, even energizing. Here's the reframe that changes everything. Action is not the reward for clarity. Action is what creates clarity. Most people wait to act until they are certain. They want the perfect plan, the guaranteed outcome, the right moment, the confidence to begin. But confidence is not a prerequisite to action. Confidence is built by acting despite uncertainty. Clarity is not found in thinking. Clarity is produced by doing. Your brain can simulate forever, but only action gives feedback. A real attempt gives real data. What works, what does not, what to adjust. Without that feedback loop, the mind keeps spinning because it has nothing concrete to anchor to. That is why overthinking feels endless. There is no external reality checking your ideas. So the first transformation is this. Move from prediction to experimentation. Instead of asking, "What if this goes wrong?" ask, "What happens if I try?" Instead of "What is the right choice?" ask, "What can I test next?" When life becomes experiment-driven instead of perfection-driven, the danger signal drops. Experiments are safe. Perfection is not. Take a breath right now. Notice your shoulders. Notice your jaw. Overthinking lives in the body before it lives in words. Your nervous system broadcasts tension before your brain constructs explanations. You do not need to win against your thoughts. You only need to regulate the body that fuels them. In the next chapters, you will learn how to do that practically, how to break paralysis into motion, how to stop spirals, how to act without waiting to feel ready, how to trust yourself again. But understand this foundation first. You are not broken. Your mind is doing exactly what it evolved to do. You taught it that avoidance equals safety. Now, you will teach it that action is safe enough. Once that shift happens, tasks stop looking like cliffs and start looking like steps. Chapter 2. The Action Threshold. Why you wait, delay, and start tomorrow. Every action has a psychological price. That price is not effort. It is not time. It is not difficulty. The real price is discomfort, emotional risk, exposure, uncertainty, and the possibility of failure. Overthinking occurs when the perceived price is higher than what your nervous system is currently willing to pay. Think of it as an invisible threshold. Below that threshold, you act automatically. You brush your teeth. You check your phone. You scroll. You make a cup of tea. There is no mental debate because your brain labels these activities as safe and predictable. No identity is threatened. No judgment is expected. No unknowns are present. Above that threshold reside the actions that would change your life. Applying, recording, showing up, launching, committing, asking, saying no, saying yes. These actions have uncertainty attached to them. They expose you to outcomes you cannot fully control. So your mind responds with analysis instead of motion. You tell yourself, I will start when you have more time, when you feel less tired, when you are more confident, when life is less chaotic, when things calm down, when you finally feel ready. But ready is not a state that precedes action. It is a state produced by repeated exposure to action. The threshold remains in place because you negotiate with fear instead of moving through it. Let us examine how the negotiation works. Your brain proposes, this task feels risky. You respond, then I will delay until the risk disappears. The delay temporarily reduces stress. Your nervous system feels relief. That relief is a reward, and the brain learns quickly from reward. It pairs procrastination with comfort. Next time, the reflex is stronger. Soon, waiting becomes default. This is why the longer you delay, the harder starting becomes. You are deepening the association between avoidance and safety. So, how do you lower the threshold? You do not lower it with motivational speeches. You lower it through something much more pragmatic. Reduce the size of the first step until it falls below your threat threshold. The task, write a book, is threatening. The task, write for 3 minutes, is less threatening. The task, open the document, is not threatening at all. Your brain does not resist writing. It resists the identity level stakes tied to the idea of being a writer or successful or judged. So you bypass that identity threat by shrinking the first step until it becomes behaviorally trivial. Once motion begins, the nervous system recalibrates. Discomfort dissipates through momentum. Motion changes physiology. Heart rhythm shifts. Muscles loosen. Attention narrows. You stop simulating and start engaging. Overthinking melts not because the thoughts disappeared, but because action consumed the attentional bandwidth that rumination previously occupied. Here is the core principle of this chapter. You do not need massive motivation. You need a lower starting barrier. If action feels impossibly heavy, you are not weak. Your first step is simply too big. Divide it again. Make it smaller. Make it embarrassingly small if necessary. Consistency built on small thresholds outruns heroics built on rare surges of willpower. There's another important factor, cognitive load. When a task is poorly defined, your brain treats it as bigger than it really is. Get healthy is not a task. It is a cluster of hundreds of possible actions. Walk for 10 minutes after lunch is a task. Clarity shrinks threat perception. Vagueness inflates it. So when you find yourself overthinking, check for vagueness. Ask, what is the smallest unambiguous action I can take in the next 2 minutes? Not the best action. Not the ultimate strategy. Just the next visible brick in front of you. Your life is built one brick at a time, regardless of how grand the structure eventually becomes. There's also the myth of right timing. You imagine a future version of yourself who has more discipline, more energy, more calm, more certainty. But that future version only exists if you train them into existence through action today. You do not discover discipline. You wire it one repetition at a time. Let us state the truth directly. You are not waiting for motivation. You are waiting for relief from discomfort. But discomfort decreases after starting, not before. The moment you begin, even clumsily, the story changes. You are no longer someone who should do the task. You are someone already doing it. Identity shifts. The brain reduces threat weighting. You experience forward energy, not because the task changed, but because your relationship to it changed. Your threshold does not disappear in one day. It lowers gradually through repeated exposures. Every time you start without feeling ready, you teach your nervous system a crucial lesson. Readiness is not required for movement. That lesson compounds. The threshold softens. Life opens. In the next chapter, we will move from thresholds to systems, how to structure your environment and habits so that overthinking becomes the unlikely option, not the default one. But carry this with you. If the first step feels impossible, make a smaller one. If the smaller one still feels impossible, make one smaller still. Cross the threshold, not by force, but by design. Chapter 3, Building an Anti-Overthinking System, so action becomes automatic. You do not rise to the level of your intentions. You fall to the level of your systems. Overthinking thrives in environments with high friction, high ambiguity, and high decision load. To stop overthinking and finally get things done, you do not only change your mind, you change your conditions. A system is anything that makes the right action easier and the wrong action harder. Start with friction. Every additional step between you and the task increases hesitation. If you need to search for tools, rearrange your schedule, find files, clear space, decide when to begin, or negotiate with yourself, your brain sees dozens of micro-obstacles. Each micro-obstacle becomes another invitation to delay. Lower friction relentlessly. Lay out materials before you need them. Predefine locations. Preset times. Put what you need in physical sightlines. Create default start points. Make the desired action so accessible that confusion cannot argue with it. Next, reduce decisions. Decision fatigue is the fuel of overthinking. The more choices you face, the more mental simulation the brain performs. You begin comparing, predicting, optimizing, and doubting. To counter this, you use pre-commitment. Choosing once to avoid choosing repeatedly. Decide in advance what time you work, where you work, on what you work first. Decide the maximum amount of time you will spend thinking before beginning. Create rules such as, if the task takes less than 2 minutes, I do it immediately. Or if I catch myself researching for longer than 10 minutes, I begin instead. These rules are not restrictions. They are liberation from indecision. Your system must also include visible progress tracking. Overthinking convinces you that you are motionless, even when you're changing in small ways. A checklist, a streak calendar, a logbook, or daily metrics turn invisible effort into visible evidence. The brain trusts evidence. When you see progress, action becomes self-reinforcing. Environment matters more than motivation. If your workspace is full of distractions, your brain will naturally seek lower energy, higher dopamine activities. Scrolling, consuming, wandering mentally. Remove temptation from immediate reach. Put friction between you and distraction, what you cannot easily access. You will not habitually indulge. And then there is identity reinforcement. When you tell yourself, I am an overthinker, you strengthen the neural pathways that support hesitation. Replace identity labels with behavioral descriptions. Not I procrastinate, but I delayed today and then started anyway. This acknowledges reality, without turning it into destiny. Your system should also respect energy rhythms. Not all hours are equal. Attempting your hardest work when you are cognitively depleted is a recipe for rumination. Identify your peak focus window, morning for some, late night for others, and schedule your highest resistance tasks there. Work with your biology, not against it. There's a final pillar, recovery. Overthinking is amplified by exhaustion. When you are sleep-deprived, undernourished, overstimulated, or emotionally overloaded, the brain interprets normal tasks as threats. Rest is not laziness. It is infrastructure. Without recovery, your nervous system remains in constant threat mode and action feels dangerous. With recovery, danger levels recede. Here is the essence of a well-designed system. Fewer decisions, fewer distractions, visible progress, smaller first steps, predefined routines, generous recovery. When these pieces are in place, action is not a heroic act of will. It is a default downstream effect of good design. Overthinking does not vanish completely. It simply loses its preferred environment. You are building conditions where movement is normal. In the chapters ahead, we will go deeper into thought spirals, perfectionism, fear of judgment, and self-trust. For now, recognize that environments shape behavior as powerfully as beliefs do. You are not only changing your mind, you are redesigning the world in which your mind operates. And when your world supports action, action follows. Chapter 4. Breaking the loop of analysis paralysis and building momentum on demand. You know that moment when your mind is loud, busy, spinning with options, and yet your hands are still? You scroll, you think, you plan, you open tabs, you research, you rethink the plan you just made, and at the end of the day, nothing meaningful has moved. That state has a name: analysis paralysis. In this chapter, we are going to dismantle it piece by piece and build something far more powerful in its place: momentum on demand. Let us begin with a simple truth. Overthinking is not a sign that you are weak. It is usually a sign that your brain is trying to protect you. When you overthink, you're trying to avoid embarrassment, failure, loss, wasted effort, discomfort, or judgment. Your brain is saying, if I just think a little bit more, maybe I can remove all risk. But the trap is this: life does not allow risk-free progress. So the more you wait for certainty, the more you train your brain to believe that action requires perfect clarity, and that belief keeps you stuck. Analysis paralysis is sustained by three major forces: information overload, perfectionism, and fear of irreversible consequences. First, information overload convinces you that there's always one more video to watch, one more article to read, one more extra opinion to consider before you begin. Second, perfectionism tells you that you need the ideal plan, the ideal timing, the ideal resources, or nothing should start. Third, fear of irreversible consequences makes small actions feel huge, final, and dangerous, even when they are not. Now listen carefully to this. Most of the decisions you delay are not actually irreversible. Most actions in your daily life are adjustable, reversible, or improvable midway. Send the email, and you can clarify later. Start the workout, and you can change the plan tomorrow. Record the first draft, and you can edit it afterward. The brain treats ordinary steps like permanent tattoos, when in reality most of them are pencil marks that can be erased or rewritten. Let us dig deeper into the mechanics of the loop. The loop looks like this. You have an intention, then you produce possibilities, then you evaluate those possibilities, and then instead of choosing one, you produce even more possibilities. Each round adds more cognitive load and more imagined risk. You feel tired, not from doing work, but from simulating the work in your head. Eventually you say, I'll start tomorrow, reinforcing the belief that thinking replaces action. To break this loop, you do not need more thinking. You need constraints. Overthinking thrives in unlimited space. When there are infinite options, the brain keeps scanning them in the hope of finding the perfect one. When choices are constrained, the brain shifts from which world is ideal to what is possible within these boundaries. So one of the most effective antidotes to analysis paralysis is setting boundaries deliberately. Time limits, option limits, and decision criteria in advance. Let us make this practical. First, use time constraints. I will think about this for 10 minutes and then make a decision. Set a visible timer. When the time ends, decide. Your brain will initially resist. It will say, but we are not ready yet. That is expected. You are retraining it. You are teaching yourself that clarity grows from action, not before action. Second, use option constraints. Do not allow yourself to evaluate 10 alternatives. Allow yourself 2 or 3. Human beings are not designed to process endless branching possibilities without fatigue. Third, use pre-committed criteria. Decide what matters most before analyzing cost, speed, learning value, alignment with long-term goals, and then choose the option that best fits those criteria instead of chasing imaginary perfection. Momentum has an important psychological secret. It is not the result of massive action. It is created by starting visibly, even if the start is small. Once you begin a task, your brain generates what psychologists call the Zeigarnik effect, an open loop that pulls you to continue. That is why it is harder to start writing than to keep writing once the first paragraph exists. Starting converts a project from abstract to concrete. It is no longer someday. It becomes in progress, and your mind wants closure. So here is a crucial reframe. Make starting your goal, not finishing, not perfecting, not optimizing. Starting. Begin the email, begin the draft, begin the workout, begin the research document. When your identity shifts from I am someone who plans to I am someone who starts, analysis paralysis loses its grip. You do not need motivation. Before you begin, beginning generates motivation. There's another powerful lever. Reduce decision size. Say this to yourself. What is the next visible step that takes less than 5 minutes? Not the full project, not the final product. Just the next visible step. Open the document. Name the folder. Write the title. Outline 3 bullet points. Lay out your workout clothes. These steps look small, but they are strategically large because they move you from mental simulation into physical engagement. Once you cross that boundary, continuing becomes dramatically easier. Let's talk about perfectionism, because it is one of the most elegant disguises of fear. Perfectionism says, I just want to do my best. But beneath that sentence is often something else. I am afraid of being seen trying. Overthinking provides a socially acceptable shield. You can say you are still researching, still refining the idea, still preparing, and no one can accuse you of laziness. But deep down, you know this. Perfect is a moving target, and it moves faster the closer you get to it. If perfection is your condition for action, you will condition yourself never to act. To break perfectionism, adopt this operational rule. Aim for progress that is slightly embarrassing. A first draft that feels rough. A video that is good but not flawless. A plan that makes sense but is not polished. This discomfort is not a sign of failure. It is a sign that you are in motion. Professionals iterate publicly. Amateurs hide, privately waiting to feel ready. Ready is often a story your brain tells to delay exposure. Next, let's address fear directly. Overthinking is often a fear avoidance strategy. You try to predict every possible outcome to protect yourself from negative feelings. But notice something powerful. The emotional discomfort you feel while overthinking is often worse than the discomfort of taking action. Anxiety while doing nothing compounds. Action, on the other hand, creates feedback. It gives you data, and data shrinks fear. You no longer fear imaginary possibilities. You respond to real information. This leads to an important principle. Replace prediction with experimentation. Instead of asking, what if this fails? Ask, what will I learn if I try? When you think experimentally, there are only 2 outcomes. You succeed, or you collect information that improves your next attempt. Failure becomes feedback. Mistakes become signals. You are no longer gambling your identity on a single outcome. You are engaging in a process of iteration. Let us now construct a concrete anti-overthinking protocol. You can use anytime analysis paralysis appears. Step 1. Name the decision. Clarity beats fog. Write down the exact thing you are stuck on. Not life direction. That is too large. Instead, should I send this message? Should I record this video today? Should I choose option A or B? Naming focuses your mind. Step 2. Define constraints. Give yourself a hard deadline to decide. Limit the number of options and establish 2 or 3 decision criteria. Do this in writing if possible. Externalizing the process weakens emotional swirl. Step 3. Select the smallest visible next step. If the decision is large, break it into micro actions. Commit to executing the smallest one immediately, even if you still feel uncertain. Action first, clarity next. Step 4. Accept imperfection in advance. Say aloud, "This will not be perfect," and that is acceptable. You disarm your inner critic before it activates. Step 5. Execute, then evaluate. Take the action. Afterward, evaluate briefly. What worked? What did not? What will I adjust? Keep the evaluation concise, so you do not fall back into rumination disguised as reflection. Notice something essential here. This protocol does not try to eliminate thoughts. It does not demand that you silence your mind or force confidence. Instead, it changes the role of thinking. Thinking becomes a tool that supports movement, not a replacement for movement. There is one final element: self-trust. Overthinking is often a symptom of low trust in your ability to handle outcomes. You may believe, "If I choose wrong, I will not recover." But your real strength is not perfect decision-making. It is adaptability. You have already recovered from missteps in your life. You have already handled situations you did not predict. The more you act, the more evidence you collect that you can respond, adjust, and continue. That evidence builds trust, and trust reduces the need to overanalyze. So as you move forward from this chapter, carry these commitments. I will constrain instead of expanding endlessly. I will start before I feel completely ready. I will treat decisions as experiments, not final verdicts. I will allow imperfect progress and iterate in motion. I will build trust by acting, not by waiting for certainty. Analysis paralysis is not your identity. It is a habit, and habits are trainable. Every small action taken despite uncertainty rewires the association in your brain between not fully ready and still moving forward. Over time, something remarkable happens. The loop reverses. Instead of thought-blocking action, action begins to quiet thought. You do not need to conquer every fear before you move. You do not need to design the perfect plan before you begin. You only need to reclaim one simple power: the ability to do the next small thing now. Chapter 5. Turning mental noise into clarity. A system for quieting the mind without forcing it. Overthinking does not only stop you from acting, it also fills your internal world with noise. Questions echo without answers. Scenarios replay. Conversations you never had unfold in your imagination. You rehearse futures that may never happen and relive past moments that cannot be changed. It feels like carrying a radio that you cannot switch off, one that keeps shifting channels on its own. In this chapter, we will not try to erase thoughts. Instead, we will learn how to change your relationship with them so that clarity can emerge naturally. The first thing to understand is this: your brain's job is to produce thoughts. Just as your heart beats and your lungs breathe, your mind generates ideas, memories, worries, plans, predictions, and commentary. When you become angry at your mind for producing thoughts, you are getting angry at a system that is doing exactly what was designed to do. The goal is not to stop thinking. The goal is to stop being carried away by every single thought as if it were a command. Think of your mind as a busy airport. Thoughts are planes taking off and landing all day long. Overthinking is when you try to jump onto every plane. Clarity comes from stepping into the control tower, observing traffic, giving priority when needed, and allowing flights to pass without boarding them. The skill we are building is not forceful suppression. It is intentional observation. Let us begin with a pattern that drives overthinking: fusion. Fusion means your brain produces a thought, and you immediately believe it as truth. I will fail. They are judging me. This will go badly. Without examination, the thought becomes reality inside your nervous system. You feel anxiety, shame, or guilt because the thought was accepted as fact. But thoughts are not facts. They are hypotheses, signals, or noise. When you fuse with them automatically, you hand them full control of your emotional state. The antidote to fusion is labeling. This is remarkably simple but powerful. When a thought arises, instead of merging with it, you give a name. I am having the thought that I will fail. Notice the difference. You are no longer inside the thought. You are observing it. You are describing your mental event rather than living inside it uncritically. This small linguistic shift creates psychological distance and reduces emotional intensity. You are not denying the thought. You are placing it in context. Let us make this practical. When a worrying scenario appears in your mind, pause and say internally, thought. When your brain replays a conversation from the past, say, memory. When you imagine a bad outcome next week, say, prediction. You are categorizing mental content. Airports function because traffic is categorized. Your mind becomes more manageable when you sort its contents rather than wrestling with them as one giant cloud. Next, we need to understand how attention works. Overthinking accelerates when attention gets stuck on a small cluster of ideas and loops there repeatedly. The mind tries to solve the loop, but because the loop itself is poorly defined, the solution never arrives. This produces exhaustion. You are not tired because you did too much. You are tired because you were mentally spinning without traction. Clarity requires two things: definition and direction. Definition means naming what your mind is focused on with precision. Direction means deciding where you want your attention to go next. Without definition, attention wanders. Without direction, it drifts back to familiar worries. So here is a simple clarity ritual. Write down what is on your mind in a single sentence. Not a page, not a paragraph. One sentence. Force yourself to compress the swirl into language. For example, I am worried that I will not finish my project on time. Or, I keep replaying the meeting and criticizing myself. Or, I am stuck choosing between two options and afraid of choosing the wrong one. Once the sentence exists on paper or screen, something powerful happens. The problem stops being fog and becomes text. You can look at it. You can interrogate it. You can decide how to respond to it. The mind hates vagueness but thrives on articulation. Now let us talk about mental noise generated from the past. Overthinking is often the brain's attempt to rewrite history. You revisit conversations, replay failures, rehearse what you should have said, and measure who you should have been. There is a psychological motive under this. The brain is trying to change the emotional meaning of the past by reprocessing it repeatedly. But the past is fixed. Its interpretation can evolve, but the events themselves will not change no matter how many times they are replayed. So here's a liberating principle. Rumination is not repair. Thinking longer about a past event does not automatically produce healing, wisdom, or closure. In fact, repeated mental replay often amplifies negative emotion and reinforces self-criticism. The constructive alternative is reflection with structure. Ask specific questions. What actually happened? What was under my control? What was outside my control? What one lesson can I carry forward? The focus shifts from endless emotional reliving to extracting learnings and releasing the rest. Mental noise is also powered by what psychologists call cognitive distortions, habitual thinking errors. These include catastrophizing, this will be a disaster, mind reading, I know what they think about me, black and white thinking, either perfect or failure, and overgeneralization, I fail once, I always fail. When these distortions run automatically, they color your perception and trigger more overthinking. You do not need to fight distortions with aggressive positivity. Instead, evaluate them the way an analyst evaluates a report. Ask 3 analytical questions. What is the evidence of this thought? What is the evidence against it? What is a more balanced description of the situation? By doing this, you are upgrading your mental operating system from emotional reaction to reasoned evaluation. The goal is not to sugarcoat reality, but to see it without magnification or distortion. At this point, we must address something subtle. Many people attempt to quiet their minds by force. They try to stop thinking, erase thoughts, or empty the mind. This usually backfires. The more you resist a thought, the stronger it returns. This is called the rebound effect. Tell yourself, do not think about failure. And suddenly failure imagery becomes more vivid. Tell yourself, stop being anxious. And anxiety increases because you are now anxious about being anxious. A more effective strategy is allowance. Allow the thought to exist without obeying it. Allow the feeling to arise without interpreting it as danger. You can say, anxious thoughts are present right now. Just as you might say, it is raining outside. Rain is not a personal failure. It is weather. Thoughts are mental weather. Changing conditions, not permanent identity. When you stop resisting them, they lose intensity and pass more quickly. Let us introduce a powerful clarity practice that you can use daily. Externalization through writing. When your mind is loud, open a blank page and write continuously for a fixed time, 5 or 10 minutes, without editing, without formatting, without correcting grammar. Empty the contents of your head onto the page. You are not trying to produce literature. You are performing cognitive unloading. Once your thoughts are written, your mind no longer needs to rehearse them repeatedly to keep them active. They exist somewhere. They are stored. This frees mental bandwidth. After unloading, do not reread everything immediately. Step away for a few minutes. When you return, skim and identify patterns. What themes repeat? What fears dominate? What decisions appear unresolved? Then convert raw emotional writing into 1 or 2 specific actions or questions. Clarity emerges not from thinking harder, but from organizing thought. Another tool for quieting mental noise is sensory grounding. Overthinking lives in the future and the past, rarely in the present. By bringing attention back to physical sensations, you anchor the mind to the current moment, which reduces mental spiraling. Look around and name 5 things you can see. Identify 4 things you can feel through touch. Notice 3 sounds around you. Identify 2 smells and 1 taste. This is not mystical. It is neurological. You are activating different brain circuits than the ones fueling rumination. We should also talk about energy. Overthinking increases dramatically when your body is exhausted, dehydrated, overstimulated, or underrested. Cognitive clarity is not just psychological. It is physiological. The brain is an organ. If sleep is poor, nutrition irregular, or constant digital stimulation keeps your nervous system activated, your mind will generate more noise and have less capacity to regulate it. Sometimes the most sophisticated mental strategy is useless if the body is depleted. Therefore, part of building clarity is designing physical basics as non-negotiables. Consistent sleep windows, movement during the day, hydration, and protected periods with reduced screen input. You are not trying to create a perfect lifestyle. You are simply recognizing that mental processes run on physical infrastructure. When the infrastructure is weak, noise increases. Let us now address self-criticism, because it is one of the loudest sources of internal noise. Many people do not just think. They attack themselves for what they think. What is wrong with me? Why am I like this? I should be better by now. This creates a secondary layer of suffering. You are not only anxious, you are ashamed of being anxious. You are not only uncertain, you are angry at yourself for being uncertain. This second layer multiplies mental noise. Clarity grows in environments of psychological safety, even internally. This does not mean avoiding responsibility or indulging excuses. It means speaking to yourself the way you would speak to someone you genuinely want to help. You can say, I am struggling right now, but I am working on it. Or, my brain is overactive at the moment. Let me use my tools. Compassion is not weakness. It is a stabilizer. It reduces noise by removing unnecessary internal attacks. Another structural source of overthinking is unmade decisions. Every pending decision occupies cognitive space. Your brain keeps it open and revisits it repeatedly, generating noise. This is why your mind often becomes quieter immediately after you decide something, even if the decision is imperfect. Deciding closes mental loops. Indecision keeps loops active. So a practical clarity strategy is to perform regular decision audits. List unresolved choices, even small ones, and make deliberate decisions or assign specific decision dates. When your brain trusts that a decision will be made at a defined time, it does not need to rehearse it endlessly. The noise decreases because the mind no longer feels responsible for keeping everything constantly active. Finally, we must recognize that clarity is not the absence of thoughts. Clarity is the ability to see thoughts without being drowned by them. A clear lake is not empty of water. It is water that allows you to see through it. A clear mind still produces ideas, concerns, and emotions. The difference is that these do not sweep you away automatically. As you move forward from this chapter, adopt these operational principles. I will observe thoughts rather than automatically believing them. I will label mental content to create distance and reduce fusion. I will define concerns precisely rather than letting them remain as fog. I will externalize mental noise through writing when my head feels crowded. I will ground myself in physical sensation when the mind spirals into past or future. I will support mental clarity with basic physical care. I will eliminate unnecessary internal self-attacks and choose firm but compassionate self-talk. I will close open loops by deciding instead of endlessly delaying. You do not need a silent mind to live effectively. You need a disciplined relationship with your thoughts. Noise will appear. Old memories will resurface. Future worries will visit. Your power lies not in preventing their arrival, but in responding with awareness instead of automatic reaction. When mental noise stops controlling your actions, clarity is no longer something you chase. It becomes a natural byproduct of structure, attention, and self-trust. And once clarity is present, the path to doing what matters next becomes visible, practical, and within reach. Chapter 6. Rewiring your habits of thought. How to train your brain to default to action instead of overthinking. Overthinking often feels like something that simply happens to you, like weather passing through your mind. But in reality, it is largely a pattern, a set of habits your brain has rehearsed so many times that they now run automatically. Just as muscles strengthen with repetition, mental pathways also strengthen through repeated use. If you repeatedly practice hesitation, rumination, and self-doubt, those responses become your default. If you repeatedly practice clarity, action, and follow-through, those become default instead. In this chapter, we are going to focus on something deeper than tips and tricks. We are going to train the brain itself. Begin with a key idea. Your brain is plastic, not physically soft, but neurologically adaptable. The scientific term is neuroplasticity. It means the brain changes structure and function based on how it is used. Every repeated thought and repeated behavior strengthens one pathway while weakening alternatives. Overthinking persists not because it is who you are, but because it is what your brain has been repeatedly rehearsing. That is the most hopeful truth in this entire book. What has been learned can be unlearned, and new defaults can be built. To understand how to rewire thought habits, we need to look at 3 layers: triggers, responses, and reinforcement. A trigger is the event or situation that starts a process, a decision, a message, a deadline, a new opportunity, or even a memory. A response is what your mind does when the trigger appears. Spirals of worry, postponement, checking endless research, or self-criticism. Reinforcement is what keeps the pattern alive. Relief you feel when you avoid action, reassurance seeking from others, temporary escape through distraction, or imaginary scenarios that give your brain the illusion of control. When you want to change a habit of thought, you cannot control the trigger. Life will continue presenting uncertainty, choices, feedback, and challenges. What you can change is your response and reinforcement. That is where rewiring occurs. You teach your brain that a new pattern follows an old trigger and that the new pattern produces better outcomes. Let us look at a common example. You receive an email that requires a reply, but the reply will be slightly uncomfortable. Maybe it involves asserting yourself, declining something, asking for clarification, or risking judgment. Trigger: the email. Automatic response: you think about it excessively. Draft multiple versions, worry about how it will be received, postpone sending, or avoid it entirely. Reinforcement: temporary relief. I don't have to deal with this yet, which teaches your brain that avoidance reduces discomfort. The brain learns when discomfort appears, postponement works, and the habit deepens. To rewire this loop, you need to change the middle and the end. The new response might be: open an email, draft a simple reply using clear language, and send within a defined time window. The new reinforcement becomes completion, clarity, and the relief of having handled it. The brain learns. When discomfort appears, action resolves it faster than avoidance. Each repetition strengthens a new circuit and weakens the old one. Rewiring begins with awareness. You cannot change a pattern you do not notice. For the next few days, simply watch for moments when overthinking begins. You are not trying to suppress it yet. You are documenting it mentally. Notice what triggered it. How does it feel in your body? Tight chest, restless energy, tension in the jaw, racing heart. What stories does your mind start telling? What if Not ready. I will make a mistake. I need more information. By noticing these elements, you are turning something automatic into something observable, and once it's observable, it becomes influenceable. Now we introduce a deliberate intervention called pattern interruption. Pattern interruption means you disrupt the automatic cascade of overthinking before it gathers full force. You insert a small, simple action that contradicts your usual habit. For example, when your brain starts to spin around a task, you say aloud, pause, stand up, take a slow breath, and write one concrete next action on paper. The interruption itself, the act of physically doing something, shifts your nervous system. You are signaling to your brain, we are moving into doing mode, not rumination mode. The next concept is implementation intention. This is a specific plan that links a trigger to a new behavior using if X, then Y language. For instance, if I start rereading my message more than twice, then I will send it. Or if I open a new tab to research something again, then I will instead spend 2 minutes acting on what I already know. Or if I catch myself predicting the worst-case scenario, then I will write down one realistic scenario and one best-case possibility as well. This sounds simple, but it is neurologically powerful because it preloads a response. You are programming your mind in advance so that the decision does not need to be made while you are emotionally activated. Let's talk about self-talk because it is the gatekeeper of action. Overthinking is often fueled by internal narratives such as, I must not make mistakes, this has to be perfect, or I cannot handle failure. These phrases are not harmless. They directly shape behavior. They increase perceived risk, amplify hesitation, and cause paralysis. To rewire thought habits, you do not need to adopt unrealistic positivity. Instead, you replace rigid, absolute statements with flexible, action-oriented ones. Here are examples of rewired phrases. I prefer to do well, but I can move forward even if it is imperfect. I might make a mistake, and if I do, I can correct it. I do not need to feel completely confident before I act. Action will give me information I cannot get from thinking alone. These are not slogans. They are new operating principles. Repeat them frequently, especially when you feel stuck. Spoken language shapes cognitive patterns. The brain listens when you speak to it intentionally. Another component of rewiring is exposure, doing the very things your mind tries to avoid. Overthinking often functions as a protection from discomfort. You avoid sending the message, starting the project, posting the video, or having the conversation because the mind predicts possible negative emotion. But avoidance teaches the brain that discomfort is dangerous. Exposure teaches the brain the opposite. Discomfort is tolerable and temporary. Each time you do something you were anxious about, and nothing catastrophic happens, the brain revises its threat calculation. The habit of avoidance weakens, and the habit of action strengthens. Exposure must be graduated. You do not begin with the largest, scariest task. You begin with something mildly uncomfortable, complete it, and allow your nervous system to settle afterward. Then you progress to something slightly more challenging. This staged approach prevents overwhelm and builds real confidence, not imagined confidence. Confidence grows from evidence, repeated proof to your own mind that you can act even while feeling uncertain. Now, let's examine reinforcement in depth. Habits persist because they are rewarded in some way. Overthinking is rewarded with short-term relief, certain illusions, or the comforting feeling of preparing. To rewire, you need to shift the reward structure so that action becomes more rewarding than rumination. This does not require elaborate systems. It requires recognition and consistency. Each time you take action despite overthinking, acknowledge it, not dramatically but clearly. I handled that. I did what needed to be done. I moved forward. That acknowledgement is not empty praise. It is reinforcement. You are signaling to the brain that this behavior matters. You may also use small external rewards, a brief break, a walk, a cup of coffee, a moment of rest, linked specifically to completed actions, not overthinking. Over time, your brain begins to associate action with positive outcomes and overthinking with friction and stagnation. Let us address identity, because identity is the deepest layer of habit. People who chronically overthink often see themselves as the type who hesitates, the one who gets stuck, or someone who is indecisive. Identity statements are powerful because the brain tends to act in alignment with how it sees itself. To rewire your habits of thought, you must gradually shift identity from overthinker to action-oriented person who sometimes overthinks but still moves forward. You do not wait for total transformation before updating identity. You update identity through behavior. When you take a small action quickly, tell yourself, this is what someone decisive does. When you complete something imperfectly but on time, say, this is what action-oriented people do. You are not lying to yourself. You are strengthening a new version of you through lived evidence. Identity is not declared. It is built. Now we turn to systems, because relying on willpower alone is fragile. Willpower fluctuates. Systems stabilize behavior. A system is a structure that makes the desired action easier and the undesired habit harder. For example, if you tend to overthink in bed late at night, create a rule that the bed is not for decision-making. Keep a notepad nearby where you quickly write down worries or decisions to revisit the next day. Then return to sleep. You are moving thought out of your head and into a container. The system holds it for you. Another system is decision batching. Instead of revisiting many small decisions repeatedly each day, assign specific windows when decisions will be made. For example, each afternoon from 3 to 3:30, you handle pending choices or responses. Outside that window, you simply list them, not solve them. This prevents constant mental switching and reduces overthinking because your brain trusts there is a scheduled time for resolution. You can also create action triggers in your environment. Lay out tools for the tasks you intend to do next. Your notebook open to a clean page. Your recording setup prepared. Your running shoes visible near the door. Environmental cues reduce friction and signal action. Overthinking thrives in environments full of distractions and obstacles. Action thrives in environments where the next step is obvious and easy to start. Let's address procrastination explicitly, because procrastination and overthinking reinforce one another. You overthink, so you delay. You delay, so anxiety increases. Anxiety increases, so you overthink more. To break this cycle, you focus on reducing activation costs, the mental energy required to begin. You do not try to finish the whole task. You simply aim to start within a fixed, brief window. This is often called the 5-minute rule. Do 5 minutes of the task, regardless of mood. Once the brain crosses the starting barrier, momentum usually carries you further. Rewiring also requires you to change how you interpret feelings. Many people believe they must feel motivated, confident, and calm before they act. This belief keeps them imprisoned. A rewired mindset says, feelings are not prerequisites for action. They are companions to action. You can feel uncertain and still begin. You can feel nervous and still speak. You can feel unready and still proceed. The brain learns from what you do while feeling discomfort, not from what you do only when everything feels perfect. We must also talk about failure, because fear of failure is one of the most powerful drivers of overthinking. Failure has been framed by many people as personal verdict rather than as information. To rewire your habits of thought, you must redefine failure as feedback. When something does not go as planned, ask, what did this teach me? What process needs adjustment? What will I try differently next time? When failure becomes data instead of identity, your brain stops trying to avoid it at all costs. Action becomes safer. Rewiring is cumulative. Do not expect your entire mental landscape to transform overnight. What matters is repetition. Each time you catch yourself overthinking and shift even slightly toward action, you are changing the brain. Each time you complete something imperfectly but deliberately, you are changing the brain. Each time you stop chasing certainty and step forward anyway, you are changing the brain. Neuroplasticity does not respond to intention. It responds to repetition. Finally, let us set the operating principles that will carry you beyond this chapter. I will treat overthinking as a habit, not a fixed identity. I will notice triggers and respond with intentional pattern interruption. I will use if X, then Y plans to link uncertainty to action. I will replace rigid internal rules with flexible, action-oriented language. I will expose myself gradually to situations I usually avoid and allow discomfort to pass. I will reinforce action through acknowledgement and small rewards. I will build systems that make starting easy and overthinking inconvenient. I will act even when motivation is low and confidence is incomplete. I will treat failure as feedback and integrate what I learn. I will build identity through repeated behavior, not through wishful thinking. Your brain is not your enemy. It is a highly adaptable system waiting for instruction through practice. Overthinking is simply the pattern it learned. Action, clarity, and follow through are patterns it can learn next. With each deliberate repetition, you are not only changing what you do, you are changing the architecture of your mind and the trajectory of your life moving forward. Chapter 7. Building momentum when your mind wants to stall. You already know what overthinking feels like in your body. The tightness in your chest. The swirl of options and what-ifs. The feeling that you should be moving, yet you are standing still. Chapter 7 is about something different. It is about momentum, not the dramatic rush of motivation that comes and goes, but the steady forward motion that persists even when your brain is busy, noisy, or doubtful. The goal here is simple. Build systems that keep you moving when your thoughts try to pull you back into hesitation. Momentum is not created by thinking your way into confidence. Momentum is created by acting your way into clarity. Confidence tends to follow action, not precede it. Most people try to solve their hesitation by reasoning with it. When I feel ready, I will start. But readiness is often a story the mind tells to justify delay. In this chapter, you will learn to stop waiting for readiness and instead design your days so that motion becomes the default, not the exception. Begin with this foundational idea. Motion breaks rumination. When your attention is occupied by direct engagement with a task, your mind has less bandwidth to spin hypothetical scenarios. That means your job is not to eliminate every intrusive thought. Your job is to reduce the time available for those thoughts to dominate you. You do this by moving quickly from intention to behavior. Not perfectly, not dramatically, simply consistently. To build momentum, treat action as a switch, not a ceremony. Overthinkers tend to ritualize beginnings. The perfect setup, the right energy, the clean environment, the ideal mood. But momentum is born from small, inelegant starts. A messy first sentence, a rough first email, a short first workout. Momentum rewards initiation, not perfection. The moment you begin, friction drops sharply. The energy it takes to continue is always lower than the energy it takes to start. This is why the first step matters disproportionately. Now let us turn to structure. Momentum requires an environment that favors movement. If everything in your day must be powered by willpower alone, overthinking will win. Willpower is inconsistent. Systems are reliable. A system is simply a pre-decided pattern that removes unnecessary choices. Every optional decision invites rumination. Reduce optionality, and you reduce mental noise. You do not need to decide when to start each day if your start time has already been chosen. You do not need to decide what task to do first if your list is sequenced in advance. You remove the conversational debate in your mind and replace it with execution. A powerful system for momentum is the next clear action rule. Instead of asking, "How will I finish everything?" ask only, "What is the next visible action I can take?" Overthinking escalates when tasks are vague. Work on the project is vague. Open the document and write the first paragraph is clear. Your brain cannot easily catastrophize specific small motions. Clarity shrinks anxiety down to a manageable size. Every time you catch yourself drifting into abstraction, convert the cloud into a concrete step. Another key to momentum is shortening the gap between intention and movement. The longer you wait after saying, "I should do this," the louder your inner commentary becomes. A simple principle counters this. The 5-second bridge. Once you decide to act, physically move within 5 seconds. Stand up, click the file, pick up the phone, place your hands on the keyboard. This bypasses the negotiation stage where overthinking thrives. It is not dramatic, but it is decisive. You train your brain to associate intention with motion rather than debate. Momentum also grows when you normalize incomplete action. Overthinkers stall because they want to do tasks in one perfect sweep. Real productivity is iterative. You move, adjust, move again. Progress in rough drafts, partial effort, imperfect attempts. When you allow yourself to return to something later, you prevent paralysis now. The phrase, "I will improve this once it exists," is more productive than "I will start once I know how to make it perfect." Something imperfect can be improved. Nothing cannot. Let us address emotional resistance. Overthinking often hides fear. Fear of judgment, failure, looking unprepared, choosing wrong. Momentum is not built by erasing fear, but by reframing your relationship with it. Treat fear as background noise, not a traffic signal. Background noise can be present while you move forward. You do not need the noise to stop before proceeding. You simply stop interpreting it as a command. The fact that you feel uncertain does not automatically mean stop. Sometimes it simply means go and learn while moving. An essential practice here is action first, evaluation later. Overthinkers invert this order. They evaluate imagined outcomes before taking any real step. Momentum demands reversal. You act first, then evaluate based on evidence, not speculation. You send the email, then see the response. You record the audio, then assess. You make the call, then adjust. Life provides real feedback that is always more accurate than imagined catastrophes. Action collapses uncertainty into data. Another engine of momentum is rhythm. Momentum likes repetition. The brain loves patterns. It relaxes inside predictable sequences. Build rituals that start your work automatically. A specific chair, a specific beverage, a specific playlist, a specific opening task. Over time, your mind learns. When this sequence begins, work happens. This is not superstition. It is conditioning. You remove the burden of daily reinvention. The rhythm carries you when motivation does not show up. Let's talk about energy management. You do not need to feel extraordinary to take action. You need to feel sufficient. Overthinking often insists on optimal energy before starting. In reality, momentum is built by honoring minimum viable energy. Tell yourself, "I do not need to feel like doing this. I only need to begin it." Starting often generates the energy you thought was required beforehand. Motion produces activation. Stillness drains it. Momentum is also strengthened by constraint. Unlimited time invites unlimited rumination. Short time blocks limit mental wandering. Work in bounded sprints. 15 minutes fully engaged will outperform 2 hours of distracted hesitation. Set a timer, choose one task, and commit to full presence until the bell. Your brain learns that there's a clear beginning and end. This reduces anxiety and increases commitment. Most people wait to feel focus. You will create focus through constraint. There is another dimension of momentum, identity. The more you act, the more you see yourself as someone who acts. Identity is built from repeated evidence. Each small completion becomes a vote for a new self-image. I am someone who follows through. Overthinking weakens when it runs into a strong identity. You are not merely trying to finish tasks. You are reshaping who you believe you are. Identity then powers future action without as much conscious effort. Expect friction. Momentum is not linear. Some days will feel heavier. Some thoughts will be louder. The measure of progress is not how quiet your mind becomes, but how reliably you move despite it. Success is not the absence of mental noise. Success is functioning with it in the background. You step forward, even while your brain presents dozens of unnecessary alternatives. This is the psychological muscle you're building to support momentum. Clean up your inputs. Constant consumption multiplies overthinking. Too many opinions, too many comparisons, too many conflicting methods create mental clutter. Reduce excessive information when you are in execution mode. Decide, then stop researching. Choose, then stop comparing. Action requires commitment to a direction, even if that direction later changes. Curiosity is useful when planning. It is expensive when doing. Momentum also benefits from visual evidence. Track motion, not just results. Results take time. Motion is immediate. A simple checklist, progress bar, or log converts invisible effort into visible proof. This reinforces a behavior neurologically. The brain likes closure. Crossing something off, marking a box, finishing a block of time, all send signals that progress is happening now, not someday. That feeling is fuel. Finally, understand this. Momentum is self-reinforcing. Every small act makes the next one easier. Every completion makes hesitation less credible. You begin to trust yourself again. Overthinking thrives when trust in self-execution is low. By acting repeatedly, you rebuild that trust brick by brick. You no longer need to argue with your thoughts. You simply outperform them with action. So here is your practical takeaway for this chapter. Choose one meaningful task. Define the next clear action. Reduce the start ritual to almost nothing. Move within 5 seconds of deciding. Work in a short, bounded sprint. Accept imperfection. Record completion. Then repeat. Not someday. Not when everything is organized. Now, with what you have, in the state you are in, momentum is not magic. It is motion, repeated, protected by structure, and fueled by the willingness to begin before you feel ready. Overthinking will still speak, but it will lose its power as you keep moving. And as you continue, you will discover something subtle but profound. You do not need to silence every thought to change your life. You only need to act more often than you hesitate. Chapter 8. Breaking the loop of self-doubt and analysis paralysis. Overthinking does not only waste time, it trains your mind into a habit of self-doubt. The longer you stay trapped in internal debates, the more convincing your doubts become. Chapter 8 is about breaking that psychological loop. The cycle where you question yourself, delay action, criticize a delay, feel worse, and then hesitate even more. To stop overthinking and finally get things done, you must learn to interrupt this cycle at multiple points. At the level of thought, emotion, and behavior. This chapter will guide you through that process in practical terms. Analysis paralysis begins with an assumption. There's a correct choice, and if I do not find it, everything will go wrong. The mind then treats normal decisions as if they were irreversible life-defining events. You do not simply choose a task. You examine it from every angle. You do not simply send a message. You rewrite it endlessly. You do not simply begin a project. You research until doing becomes impossible. The fear beneath this is usually not about the task itself, but about what the task says about you. You worry about appearing unprepared, unqualified, or inadequate. So you think more, hoping to eliminate risk entirely. But risk cannot be eliminated from real life. It can only be managed. The belief that perfect certainty must exist before action is the core engine of self-doubt. When certainty fails to arrive, you conclude that something is wrong with you. In reality, nothing is wrong. Uncertainty is normal. Decisions require movement without full information. Those who succeed are not the ones who think longest. They are the ones who tolerate uncertainty while acting. To break the loop, begin by identifying the voice of self-doubt. It rarely screams. It whispers in seemingly reasonable language. Maybe tomorrow. You are not ready yet. You should learn more first. What if you fail? These statements seem protective, but they prevent growth. Your task is not to argue with this voice forever. Your task is to recognize it quickly and label it as doubt rather than truth. The act of labeling creates distance. Instead of, I cannot do this, it becomes, I am having a thought that I cannot do this. That small shift removes the illusion that every thought must be obeyed. Once recognized, doubt must be met with behavior, not endless internal debate. This is a key principle. Doubt grows in stillness and shrinks in motion. When you sit without acting, your mind fills the vacuum with hypotheses, fears, and imagined consequences. When you begin moving, your brain receives immediate sensory feedback that interrupts these spirals. Action cuts through speculation because reality replaces imagination. So to break the loop, you must adopt a bias toward doing rather than proving. A critical strategy here is good enough decision-making. Overthinkers chase the optimal choice. Effective people accept a sufficient one. A sufficient decision meets the objective, even if it is not theoretically perfect. In dynamic, real-world environments, iterative improvement outperforms perfectionism. You choose, act, observe results, refine, and continue. Each iteration produces data that thinking alone cannot supply. When you accept sufficiency, you reclaim time, energy, and momentum. Let us turn to emotional regulation. Analysis paralysis intensifies when emotions are misinterpreted as evidence. Feeling anxious does not mean you are making the wrong choice. It means you are doing something that matters. Feeling uncertain does not mean you lack ability. It means you are stepping beyond familiar territory. Psychological growth always arrives with emotional turbulence. The goal is not to eliminate discomfort. It is to stop confusing discomfort with danger. You can feel uneasy and still proceed. You can feel imperfect and still deliver. To support this emotionally, use the practice of allow and act. Allow the feeling. Do not fight it, suppress it, or dramatize it. Then act anyway. Say internally, I can feel this and still continue. Over time, your nervous system learns that uncomfortable emotions are survivable and do not require avoidance. This is how confidence is actually formed, through repeated experiences of functioning in the presence of doubt. Self-doubt also feeds on comparison. When you constantly measure yourself against experts, influencers, peers, or idealized versions of yourself, you distort your perception of what is achievable. You are comparing your behind-the-scenes reality with someone else's finished product. The result is predictable. You conclude that you are behind, lacking, or unqualified. To break this, narrow your frame of reference. Compare yourself only with your past self and your current commitments. The relevant question is not, am I as good as everyone else? But, am I doing better than I was before? Another component of the loop is procrastination disguised as research. Learning feels productive, but beyond a certain point it becomes avoidance. You collect frameworks, opinions, tutorials, and strategies without actually implementing any of them. The solution is to maintain a strict implementation ratio. For every unit of learning, there must be a unit of action. If you read one article, apply one idea. If you watch one tutorial, execute one step. Research without execution is simply high-quality delay. Let's examine the role of standards. Perfectionism is an overthinking accelerator. Setting impossibly high standards ensures that almost everything you attempt will feel inadequate before it even begins. You then hesitate, revise, stall, and criticize yourself. Ironically, this does not raise performance. It destroys it. To exit this trap, separate your standard for effort from your standard for outcome. Your effort standard should be high. You show up, you apply yourself, you refine. Your outcome standard should be realistic. Progress, not flawlessness. You control effort. Outcomes depend on multiple variables. Anchor your self-evaluation to what you can actually control. Additionally, self-doubt thrives in isolation. When your thoughts remain entirely private, they grow unchecked. Simply articulating goals, decisions, or struggles to another person often dissolves half the confusion. Externalizing forces clarity. You do not necessarily need advice. You sometimes just need to hear yourself think out loud. If another person is unavailable, writing performs a similar function. Put your thoughts on paper and watch them lose their exaggerated power. What felt overwhelming in your mind becomes organized, finite, and workable in writing. A powerful tactical tool in breaking the loop is constraint-based execution. Remove unlimited choice. Unlimited choice invites unlimited analysis. Instead, define boundaries, a fixed time block, a finite list, a specific scope. Tell yourself, for the next 20 minutes, I will only work on this one step. Constraint reduces cognitive noise and forces momentum. Many people are not overwhelmed by the work itself, but by the open-endedness surrounding it. Close the boundaries and clarity emerges. You must also recalibrate your internal narrative about mistakes. Overthinkers treat mistakes as identity verdicts. If I fail, it proves I am incapable. High performers treat mistakes as information. If I fail, I learn what to adjust. The same event generates opposite psychological consequences based entirely on interpretation. When mistakes become data, they lose their threat. You become less defensive, more curious, and therefore more productive. Progress is not the absence of mistakes. It is the intelligent response to them. Let us address one of the most subtle drivers of self-doubt, delayed self-trust. Many individuals wait for external validation before allowing themselves to believe in their own judgment. They need permission to proceed. As a result, they stall until someone else approves a decision. To break this dependency, you must practice self-authorization. Give yourself explicit internal permission to act with incomplete information. Tell yourself, I'm allowed to try. Self-trust is not granted. It is built through decisions made and owned. There is also a physiological dimension to analysis paralysis. Mental loops are amplified by fatigue, poor sleep, low movement, and overstimulation. A tired brain perceives normal tasks as threats and exaggerates risk. While this book focuses on psychology and behavior, your biology matters. Short walks, hydration, light exercise, and consistent sleep schedules reduce cognitive noise. When the body stabilizes, the mind becomes quieter, not because thoughts disappear, but because your stress response is less activated. Breaking the loop requires practice, not a single breakthrough. You will not wake up one day with zero self-doubt. What changes is your behavior in the presence of it. Instead of freezing, you move. Instead of spiraling inward, you externalize the next step. Instead of catastrophizing, you test. Instead of waiting for motivation, you initiate. Over time, your brain learns a new default response. Action precedes clarity. To operationalize this, implement the decide, do, debrief cycle. First, decide quickly using sufficient information, not exhaustive certainty. Second, do the task with full engagement for a bounded time period. Third, debrief. Assess what worked, what failed, and what to adjust. Then repeat. This cycle replaces paralysis with continuous improvement. It shifts your identity from someone who overthinks to someone who iterates. Here is the practical assignment for this chapter. Identify one decision you've been postponing due to overanalysis. Define the smallest executable step related to it. Give yourself a specific time limit to begin, preferably today, not someday. Expect discomfort, but move forward regardless. Once completed, record the action and briefly reflect on what you learned. You will notice that the consequences you feared were either manageable or non-existent. What actually changed was your internal narrative. I can act even while feeling unsure. Self-doubt and analysis paralysis lose power not through argument, but through evidence. Evidence that you can function, progress, and adapt without perfect certainty. Each action you take becomes a counterexample to the story that you are incapable. With repetition, the story itself collapses. You are not required to banish every doubtful thought before taking your next step. You are required to stop letting those thoughts dictate your behavior. You will still experience hesitation. You will still have questions, but you will move anyway. And in moving, you will finally discover what overthinking has been preventing you from seeing. Capability is built through action, not predicted through rumination. Chapter 9. Turning distraction into focused action. Overthinking rarely exists alone. It travels with distraction. When your mind is busy analyzing everything, the easiest escape is to drift into something else. Scrolling, checking, watching, browsing, rearranging, and just for a minute diversions that quietly expand into hours. The paradox is simple. You feel overwhelmed by everything you have to do, and yet you find yourself doing almost nothing that matters. This chapter is about breaking that pattern. You will learn how to convert distraction from a default reaction into a signal, and how to build focused action even when your attention feels fragmented. Distraction is not only about technology. It is about avoidance. When a task feels uncertain, emotionally heavy, or ambiguous, your brain looks for relief. Distractions promise immediate comfort, stimulation, and clarity. They cost almost nothing in effort, and they deliver instant reward. Work, by contrast, delivers delayed reward and demands energy. Overthinking increases the emotional cost of beginning meaningful work. As that cost rises, distractions become more attractive. Understanding this dynamic is essential because distraction is not a failure of discipline. It is a response to perceived discomfort. The first step in regaining focus is recognizing that attention follows intention. If your intention is vague, your attention has nowhere to land. You do not get distracted in the abstract. You get distracted from something specific. When that something is undefined, your mind floats toward whatever is easiest. Therefore, Clarity precedes focus. Before you demand concentration from yourself, define exactly what you are concentrating on. Not a category like work, but a specific action like outline the first 3 bullet points of the presentation. Overthinking and distraction reinforce each other through unstructured time. Large blocks of undefined hours create psychological space for rumination and avoidance. You tell yourself, I have the whole afternoon, and your mind answers, then there's plenty of time to delay. The solution is not to eliminate free time, but to deliberately structure portions of it. Focus thrives in containers. When time has boundaries, attention organizes itself. When time is endless, distraction fills it by default. A practical method for this is the single task window. Instead of trying to manage your entire day mentally, construct short windows, 15, 25, or 50 minutes, where only one task is allowed. During that window, everything else becomes irrelevant by definition. You do not debate whether you should check messages. You already decided the purpose of the window. Distraction weakens when it must compete against a clearly declared objective. You do not fight impulses one by one. You preempt them by committing your attention ahead of time. Distraction is also sustained by proximity. Whatever is physically close is cognitively tempting. If your phone is beside you, it is not neutral, it is an invitation. If unnecessary tabs are open, they are not passive, they are traps. One of the simplest ways to reduce distraction is to redesign your immediate environment so that only task-relevant tools are present. This is not about extreme minimalism. It is about deliberate friction. Make the harmful behaviors slightly harder and the helpful ones easier. The brain is lazy in predictable ways. Use that to your advantage. Now consider mental distractions, intrusive thoughts, worries, ideas unrelated to the task. Many people attempt to eliminate these before working. They tell themselves, I will focus once my mind is quiet. This approach fails because the mind does not become quiet on command. Instead, learn to work with internal noise. Treat distracting thoughts as background traffic, not emergencies. You notice them, acknowledge them briefly, and return to the task. Focus is not the absence of distractions. It is a practice return to what matters. One effective strategy for handling mental noise is the parking lot. Keep a notepad nearby not for multitasking, but for capturing interruptions. When a thought arises that feels urgent but unrelated, email that person, look up this topic. Remember to buy something. Write it down and continue working. This reassures your mind that the thought is not forgotten, freeing you to stay engaged. You externalize the distraction instead of mentally juggling it. The simple act of writing converts anxiety into organization. Distraction also thrives when tasks are too large. The brain resists amorphous responsibilities like finish the project or fix my life. These labels are cognitively heavy and emotionally intimidating. You're attention rebels, seeking lighter alternatives. Break tasks down until the next step feels doable without argument. Focus loves specificity. The more concrete the action, the easier it becomes to begin. When distractions are winning, it is often not because the task is hard, but because it is undefined. Let us address digital distraction directly. Technology is designed to capture and hold attention. Notifications trigger instant curiosity. Infinite feeds provide endless novelty. Every time you interrupt your task to check something, you do not simply lose seconds. You break cognitive momentum. The brain requires time to re-enter deep focus after a switch. This is why just a quick check feels harmless but results in major productivity losses. The solution is not to demonize technology, but to control when and how you interact with it. Create intentional communication windows instead of constant availability. Decide specific times to check messages, social platforms, or updates. Outside these windows, treat communication as deferred, not urgent by default. You will discover that most notifications do not require immediate response. They only demand attention because they are visible. When you choose when to engage, you reclaim your cognitive bandwidth. Focus is not about superhuman willpower. It is about reducing unnecessary decisions. There is also an emotional component to distraction, boredom. Meaningful work often includes repetitive, unglamorous segments. Overthinking looks for stimulation elsewhere. telling you that the boredom is a sign that something is wrong. In reality, boredom is a normal phase of sustained effort. Mastery is built through long stretches of unremarkable practice. When you learn to tolerate boredom without fleeing from it, you gain an advantage that many never develop. You stop requiring constant novelty and instead develop endurance. Another subtle driver of distraction is identity conflict. If you secretly believe you are not the type of person who succeeds at the task before you, your attention will escape it. Distraction becomes self-protection. If you never fully try, you never fully fail. To counter this, act first. Identity follows action. Each focused work session becomes evidence that contradicts your old narrative. Slowly, you begin to see yourself as someone capable of sustained attention and follow-through. Fatigue must also be considered. A tired brain is distractible by design. It seeks easier activities to conserve energy. If you consistently struggle with focus, examine your sleep, hydration, and movement patterns. Simple physical adjustments produce significant cognitive benefits. Focus is not purely psychological. It is physiological as well. You cannot expect stable concentration from an exhausted nervous system. Rest supports discipline more than self-criticism ever will. Let us now turn to conversion. How to turn distraction into action. Treat distraction as a signal, not only as a problem. When you catch yourself drifting, instead of condemning yourself, ask a precise question: what am I avoiding right now? The answer is often a specific step, conversation, or decision that feels uncomfortable. Then make that step your starting point. You transform distraction into an indicator of where progress is most needed. Avoidance highlights growth edges. Another powerful tactic is the reset ritual. When your focus collapses, because it will, do not spiral into guilt or try to power through confusion. Pause. Stand up. Take a breath. Clear your desk or close unnecessary screens. Sit back down and begin again with a clearly defined next step. Resetting prevents distraction from expanding into the rest of your day. You are not required to be perfect. You are required to recommit. Pair this with the principle of first move fast. At the start of any work block, take immediate action within the first minute. Type the first sentence. Open the file. Sketch the outline. Press record. Early action prevents your mind from drifting into overthinking. You anchor attention to behavior before analysis can take over. Once movement begins, focus becomes easier to sustain. The hardest part is the first motion. You should also differentiate between productive breaks and impulsive escapes. Breaks are intentional pauses designed to restore energy. Escapes are unconscious reactions to discomfort. Plan your breaks. Decide their length and activity in advance. During breaks, rest fully instead of half working and half distracting. Then return at a specific time. This structure prevents guilt and fragmentation. You are allowed to rest strategically, not reactively. There is another form of distraction that is less obvious: overplanning. You build detailed systems, color-coded lists, elaborate frameworks, but you do not execute. Planning feels clean and safe. Action feels uncertain. Recognize when planning has become a substitute for doing. The test is simple. Has your planning resulted in concrete movement? If not, you are still in avoidance. Convert plans into action by ending each planning session with one scheduled execution block. To operationalize all of this, implement the focus sprint protocol. Select one task, define the next step, remove unrelated tools, set a timer, begin within 60 seconds, capture intrusive thoughts on a notepad, and recommit after any lapse. At the end of the sprint, record what you completed, then rest briefly and repeat. You are training your brain to associate discomfort with decisive motion rather than escape. Here is the assignment for this chapter. For the next 3 days, track your distractions, not to shame yourself, but to reveal patterns. Write down when and why you drift. Identify the tasks that most often trigger avoidance. Then apply the protocol to one of them. Begin with small time blocks and expand gradually. You will discover that many distractions lose their strength the moment you stop escaping and start engaging. Turning distraction into focused action does not require a different brain. It requires different habits of attention, clearer intentions, better environmental design, and a willingness to act before you feel perfectly ready. You do not need to eliminate every source of distraction in your life. You only need to build enough structure and self-awareness to keep choosing what matters most. Focus is not a personality trait. It is a practice skill. Each time you notice yourself drifting and deliberately return to the task, you strengthen that skill. Over time, the return becomes faster, easier, and more automatic. You move from a life shaped by distraction to a life shaped by deliberate action. And as your attention aligns with your priorities, you finally experience what overthinking has been delaying: real progress, visible results, and the quiet confidence that comes from doing what you said you would do. Chapter 10. Building a life that makes overthinking unnecessary. Overthinking is not only something you do. It is something your life design either invites or discourages. You can master tactics, practice focus, set timers, and use every strategy discussed so far. But if your daily environment, commitments, and priorities are fundamentally misaligned, your mind will keep spiraling. In this final chapter, we shift from short-term techniques to long-term architecture. The goal is not merely to stop overthinking temporarily. The goal is to build a life where overthinking loses its leverage. Overthinking thrives in three conditions: uncertainty, misalignment, and excess. When you are unsure what matters, when your actions do not reflect your values, and when you are drowning in too many choices or commitments, your brain tries to solve the problem by thinking harder. It loops, analyzes, replays, predicts, and simulates. But overthinking cannot fix structural problems. Only decisions can. This chapter is about making those decisions deliberately. Let us begin with alignment. Many people overthink because they are living in tension between what they believe, what they want, and what they are actually doing. You may stay in a job you dislike, maintain relationships that drain you, or delay work you care about. The brain senses a gap and keeps spinning around it. Thoughts become negotiations. Maybe it is not so bad. Maybe I should just endure. Maybe someday it will change. The longer the misalignment persists, the louder the mind becomes. It is not confusion, it is a signal. Your mind is telling you that something in your life requires a decision. To reduce overthinking at its roots, you must ask hard, clarifying questions. What truly matters to me? What am I pretending not to know? Where am I tolerating situations that consistently exhaust me? These questions do not produce instant comfort. They produce clarity. And clarity simplifies thinking. When you become honest about your priorities, many choices cease to require endless analysis. They begin to fall into place because they align with something larger than temporary emotion. A powerful practice for alignment is defining your non-negotiables. These are the principles, activities, or standards you refuse to sacrifice. They might include health, time with loved ones, deep work, integrity, or creative expression. Write them down. When decisions arise, measure them against your non-negotiables. If a choice repeatedly violates them, the answer is already clear, even if it is difficult. Overthinking often exists because you're treating every decision as equal. They are not. Some are governed by principle, not preference. Now let us address excess. Your mind struggles when your life is overloaded. Too many commitments, too many goals, too many unfinished projects all compete for attention. You do not have a thinking problem. You have an overcommitting problem. The brain tries to juggle everything at once, then becomes overwhelmed and loops through the same worries. Reducing overthinking frequently requires subtracting, not adding. You must decide what to release. To do this, perform a commitment audit. List everything that currently demands your time or mental energy: projects, obligations, routines, relationships, responsibilities. Then classify each item into 3 groups: essential, optional, or draining. Essential items support your values and long-term goals. Optional items add value but are not critical. Draining items cost significant energy without meaningful return. The next step is decisive. Eliminate or greatly reduce the draining items. If elimination is impossible, set boundaries that limit their influence. Each reduction creates cognitive space where overthinking once lived. Overthinking also thrives when life is passive. If your days are driven mostly by reaction, responding to messages, requests, crises, and demands, you never feel in control. Lack of agency fuels rumination. You replay conversations, Imagine alternate responses and rehearse future scenarios because you feel like life is happening to you. The antidote is intentionality. When you intentionally plan parts of your day, even small parts, you restore a sense of authorship. You become an active participant rather than a permanent responder. Intentionality does not mean micromanaging every hour. It means deciding what your day should contain before it is consumed by everything else. Choose one meaningful action daily that advances a goal you truly care about. Complete it before the world places its demands on you. Over time, this simple habit rewires your identity. You no longer view yourself as someone stuck in thought, but as someone who turns intention into motion. Overthinking weakens when you repeatedly prove, through action, that you can influence your reality. Another factor is unresolved emotion. Overthinking frequently masks feelings you have not yet acknowledged. Fear, grief, anger, disappointment, shame. Instead of feeling them, the mind intellectualizes them. You replay events, analyze motives, and construct scenarios as a way of avoiding the underlying experience. But feelings that are not felt do not disappear. They convert into mental noise. To build a life with less overthinking, you must become emotionally honest. Name what you are feeling, even if it is uncomfortable. Allow it to pass through rather than circling it mentally. Emotional honesty does not mean dramatizing every sensation. It means recognizing, I am afraid, I am hurt, I am uncertain, without instantly trying to fix it through analysis. Emotions process through attention, not argument. When you allow yourself to experience them, the mind has less reason to spin. The loop breaks because its purpose, avoiding discomfort, is no longer needed. Let's talk about identity. Overthinking becomes chronic when you start to define yourself by it. You say, this is just who I am. I am an overthinker. Identities are powerful self-fulfilling scripts. If you believe overthinking is part of your personality, you stop questioning it. You reinforce it with behavior. Each time you hesitate, replay, or ruminate, it seems to confirm the story. To dismantle this, shift from identity-based language to process-based language. Instead of I am an overthinker, say, I have practiced overthinking. I can practice something else. Practice is a key word. You have rehearsed the habit of rumination for years. You can rehearse the habit of decisive action, present attention and self-trust in the same way. The brain learns through repetition. Every moment you choose action over analysis or acceptance over rumination is a small neurological vote for a different identity. Over time, quantities become qualities. You do not force a new identity. You build it through repeated behavior that supports it. Long-term reduction of overthinking also requires cultivating environments that support calm. Your surroundings matter. Cluttered spaces create cognitive clutter. Chaotic relationships generate mental chaos. Constant noise, interruptions, or negativity all keep your mind activated. This does not require perfect minimalism or isolation. It requires intentional curation. Keep objects, people, and inputs in your life that support focus, growth, and stability. Reduce or distance yourself from those that repeatedly trigger stress without purpose. One of the most powerful life designs against overthinking is having a clear purpose, even if it is modest. Purpose does not need to be grand or dramatic. It is simply the direction that gives your actions meaning. Without it, every choice feels equally uncertain and endlessly debatable. With purpose, decisions become directional. You ask, does this move me toward or away from what matters most? Thought simplifies under purpose. It becomes a tool, not a trap. Developing purpose often begins not with answers, but with experiments. You do not wait until you figure out your life to act. You act to figure it out. Try projects, roles, creative pursuits, education, service. Observe which ones energize you and which ones drain you. Purpose is discovered through engagement, not speculation. Overthinking tells you to wait until you are certain. Progress happens when you begin despite uncertainty. Let us now address self-trust. At the core of chronic overthinking is a lack of trust in your own ability to handle outcomes. You think endlessly because you fear making the wrong decision, saying the wrong thing, or choosing the wrong path. The problem is not the decision. It is a belief, I will not be okay if this goes badly. To weaken overthinking long-term, You must build evidence that you can cope with imperfection. This is done by acting, encountering consequences, and discovering that you remain capable afterward. Self-trust is earned. You build it each time you take a risk appropriate to your values, learn from mistakes without collapsing into self-judgment, and keep going after discomfort. When you trust yourself to adapt, you do not need to predict every possible outcome in advance. The mind stops rehearsing catastrophes because it knows you can respond if they occur. Overthinking fades when confidence grows, not the other way around. A sustainable life against overthinking also incorporates renewal. Fatigue, stress, and constant stimulation make thoughtful clarity impossible. Rest is not a reward for finishing everything. It is a prerequisite for thinking well. Sleep, quiet moments, exercise, reflection, and time away from devices all restore cognitive and emotional resources. When you consistently neglect renewal, your mind becomes noisy by default. Building sustainable recovery habits is not luxury. It is a foundation of stable attention. Now, let us integrate everything into practice. Building a life that makes overthinking unnecessary does not happen overnight. It is constructed through consistent, small, structural changes. Define your non-negotiables. Eliminate draining commitments. Design daily intentionality. Tell the emotional truth. Replace identity labels with practice language. Curate your environment. Experiment to discover purpose. Act to build self-trust. Protect renewal. Each element weakens one of the pillars that keeps overthinking alive. You are not fighting isolated thoughts. You are redesigning conditions that generate them. As we conclude this chapter and this journey, remember this: the goal is not to eliminate thinking. Thought is essential. Reflection, planning, imagination, and analysis are tools that shape your future. The goal is to stop being trapped by thought, to live in such a way that thought serves action rather than replacing it, to create a structure where clarity, alignment, and intentional motion are normal. Overthinking has delayed decisions, postponed dreams, interrupted sleep, and stolen presence from many moments of your life. But it is not permanent. It is a habit reinforced by circumstances that can change. Each small act of alignment, each boundary set, each decision made without endless rehearsal is part of that change. You do not need a new mind. You need a new way of relating to it. Your life is built one decision at a time. Choose decisions that reflect your values. Choose action when your mind demands endless analysis. Choose presence when rumination tries to pull you into the past or future. As you do, you will discover something unexpected. The less you fight your thoughts and the more you build a life aligned with what matters, the quieter overthinking becomes. You are not here to live entirely inside your head. You are here to do, to experience, to learn, to connect, to build, and to move forward. Let your thoughts support that mission, not replace it.